Ms. Alomar was formerly incarcerated in the Virginia Correctional System and has a very impressive educational background, much of which she completed or started in prison. She is currently near completion of a bachelor's degree in sociology and social work. And Ms. Alomar earned UVA's Darren Business School Certificate in Entrepreneurship and Financial Management. Not only that, she's been certified as an electrician's helper, computer-aided drafter, optician, and completed the U.S. Library of Congress certification program to be a Braille transcriber. No small achievement. Ms. Alomar has participated in re-entry panel discussions addressing the community and frequently visits Virginia correctional institutions as a featured speaker for inmates about to be released or re-entering citizens, whom she tells about her incarceration, release, and transition back to society. Ms. Alomar finds inspiration in the thought and the quote that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. Thank you for being with us today. It's our pleasure.
Thank you. I was quite shocked and honored when I was asked to come and do this. Part of my training to get my associate's degree included public speaking. I'm really happy about that right now. Gandhi once said, "You can chain me, you can torture me, you can even destroy this body, but you can never imprison my mind." And I found that I liked that quote before what happened to me, but I found once I got to prison that it's not only words that I found inspiration in, but I actually lived by them for the 12 plus years that I was incarcerated. My name is Erin Alomar. I was incarcerated in an all-female correctional institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia for 12 years and 3 months. I've been home for about 19 months now. During my incarceration, as Mr. Provaznik said, I did participate and complete numerous vocational training and educational programs. I would really like to say that my reasoning behind that was all because I was trying to better myself when I got home, which was a big part of it. Education has always been very important to me. My mother was a school teacher and still substitute teaches. So it was made very important to me as a young child, instilled that education was important. A very big part why I started doing that when I first got to prison was because it made my time go by faster. I realized, in kind of starting out for all the wrong reasons, I realized in doing that that I was pretty good at it. I was pretty good at learning stuff, and I could learn all these other things that I may not have I never would have thought to have learn how to do Braille. It's not something I, woke up one day and said, hey, let me do this. They offered it. It sounded interesting, and I said, let me give this a try. As Mr. Provaznik said, I did earn an associate's degree while I was there. I was fortunate enough to be, if you can be fortunate to be in prison, I was fortunate enough to be at the facility when Doris Buffett came and proposed a college scholarship program for women. She had tried the program out previously in, I believe, New York, and decided she wanted to extend that and try it with women, and she just happened to pick the one that I was at. So I was lucky enough to be there for that. The UVA Darden School of Business additionally decided that they were going to try a pilot program and see how it went, and I got to be a participant in that as well. So I don't want to say I was fortunate to be in prison, but if I was fortunate to be there, I was fortunate to be there when the right things were offered. When asked to review the PIAAC survey of incarcerated adults, I was kind of curious as to what I would find. What I did find was that it pretty much paralleled a lot of my own observances and experiences while I was incarcerated. For example, the PIAAC study reports that over 2/3, or 70 to 80% of adults enroll in classes and academic programs, or they have a desire to do that. As I said, I may have started for the wrong reasons, but I continued to want to do more while I was there. And a large part of it was because I used to tell people I have under no delusion that when I go home there'll be a big label strapped across my chest, ex-felon. and it'll be really hard for people, whether socially or in the job market, to get past that. And so I figured however many other labels I could hang around my neck to go and maybe kind of hide that ex-felon one, the better. So a lot of it had to do with me trying to better my job prospects when I came home. I found I had a strong desire, but as well I also found the majority of my peers that were incarcerated also had that same desire. Staff and the administration kind of took a different turn. When the college program I mentioned was first introduced, an administrator was overheard making a comment that the program would fail. It would not succeed because there was not enough interest among the female inmate population in furthering their education. And I can tell you that when a couple of us out in the population heard that that comment had been made, we were pretty outraged because we knew that that was untrue. Thankfully, somebody ignored that and decided to offer the program anyway. They offered 25 slots for the very first pilot group to go through the program. You had to be selected, though, because 125 women applied. And these were all women who were at least at some level, had high school credits or a GED or a high school diploma and could actually apply to get into college. I was lucky enough to be one of the 25. Another example of the desire of women to actually take classes and further themselves while they were incarcerated can be seen with the GED classes. The majority of the women that I encountered when they first got there had no GED, little to no high school at all. And so the institution offered GED classes. There was anywhere between 2 and 4, and there were about 4 sessions. But mind you, the institution I was at had 1,200 women. Some of the women did not want to leave their jobs that they had because they had no one to support them, and the little bit of money they got from their institutional job was the only way that they could live. Even with those who did not or could not sign up for the classes, the waiting lists were astronomical. It was so overwhelming as far as overcapacity the classes were. Resources were limited, as I said. When I left, when I got there, there were 4 GED teachers. When I left, there were only 2. While in my opinion, in my observance, I believe the number of women entering who needed the class actually increased. But however, GED classes weren't the only classes or programs where such lists existed. The institution where I was at, I was kind of lucky in that it offered a pretty wide range of vocational and educational classes. Not all institutions had that. The downside of that was everybody wanted to take them. So, for instance, I took an optical technology class. I became a certified optician. When I graduated from that, I had to wait 3 years before I could even think of applying to go to take another course. And at that time, when you sign up, there's another 2 to 3 year wait list before you actually could enroll. So, again, when we heard that one comment that there was no interest among the female population to try to better themselves, those kind of examples is exactly why we were outraged, because the truth was so far from that. Trying to think, let's see. All of these examples I'm talking about as far as the interest in the waiting list definitely go to support PIAAC's report showing that incarcerated adults do have an interest in furthering their education and their skill set. At one point, George W. Bush said, "America is the land of second chances, and when the gates to the prison open, the path ahead should lead to a better life." And I think that quote kind of encompasses the exact feeling that we all had and why we were taking a lot of these classes. The majority of women I came in contact with that enrolled or planned to enroll in courses, whether they be academic or vocational, did so in the hopes not only of expanding their knowledge, but helping increase the likelihood of finding gainful employment upon release. Similarly, the PIAAC study reports that 80% of those who want to enroll in an educational program do so to improve their skills and expand their job prospects when they return back to society. One such program that offered It was offered to pretty much the general population. There were no time limits. Certain classes, the Darden program, for instance, was only offered to women who were within a certain time frame of their release date. If you had a life sentence or if you had more than 5 years, they wouldn't even consider you for the program. But one that was pretty much offered across the board was the information technology or computer class, and among inmates we called it the business software class. As my own release from prison drew closer, I enrolled in the IT course expecting to be brought up to date with some of the more recent software, so I wasn't coming home and completely being, I mean, cell phones had already taken off. I knew I was pretty much in trouble when I had to get a smartphone, but I wanted to at least be able to sit down and, you know, type up a document on a computer. Unfortunately, the course was severely outdated, and it was taught, at first it taught only the most basic of skills. I sat down, the first week and a half of class was how to type, how to open a new document, how to change the font, how to indent a paragraph, things like that. Essentially, the class covered the very basic elements of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Additionally, the software that we were trained on that was available was 2 to 3 generations behind what current software of the time was. And as an example, in 2015, very early on, right before I left, a very small handful of computers that were used to teach the IT class finally were updated. And when I say updated, I mean they had Windows 7 installed in them. Therefore, the training received was useful, but only minimally. As was mentioned when we were talking about prison employment, it's a very prevalent and important element of life in prison. You don't get paid much, but you get paid. You know, the prison gives you a roof over your head. You don't have to worry about you know, having a place to sleep at night. You get 1 roll of toilet paper and a bar soap. You want to brush your teeth? You better get a job, or have somebody who's sending you money. But the majority of women didn't have any kind of a support system outside, so they worked. The majority of these jobs were manual labor employment. And by that I mean janitorial, cleaning showers, cleaning toilets, dust mopping common areas, doing laundry, that type of thing. The other big one was food service, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You prepare the meals, you clean up after the meals, a lot of physical labor. The PIAAC study reported that 82% of adults incarcerated with a job never used or calculated fractions, decimals, or percentages. And I absolutely think that that is a very representative of what I witnessed myself. It's important to note that the basic math skills are severely lacking among the prison population. The associate degree program that I spoke of earlier required those accepted through the application process to take a math placement test, just as you would on regular admission into a college out here. Of the 25 women that were accepted into the initial group, only 2 of us passed the basic math placement test, myself included. Because of that, for the first 3 semesters that college courses were offered, the only math was remedial, and everyone, including those that passed, were forced to take it. In the I was a little bitter about that at first. In the long run, I think it benefited me because I became a tutor. I became one of the people that could help others. And they say, you know, you really know something if you can teach it, if you can turn it inside out and come at it from several different angles. And so I was dealing with different personalities and people with different learning styles and things of that nature, and being able to kind of break it down and explain it to them really helped. And I think it boosted some of my confidence. At some point in my prison stay, I learned I was pretty good at math. I really thought I was terrible at it before. Because of my passing score, I was approached by the program's coordinator and asked to be a math tutor for the college level courses. A very few other college tutor positions were then filled after an extensive search of the inmate population to find individuals that could actually perform to the math skills needed to effectively hold the position. These tutoring jobs are among the very, very few positions available in the institution that actually required the use of any math or even literacy skills. I've talked about the numerous programs and classes afforded to me during my incarceration, but I feel I was extremely fortunate. The facility I was held at provided many opportunities to further my education and provide me with vocational trainings. Unfortunately, this is not the norm for most Virginia female correctional institutions. I'm not sure about outside of the state. I spent a brief 7 weeks at a different facility where there were 250 women. Only one GED class was offered, and it was held twice a week, and 15 women could attend each class. Manual labor jobs were actually forced. You had to have a job while you were there. And there was, with one GED class, there were, I think, 5 girls that helped tutor that class. Everything else was manual labor. They only offered one vocational class, and that class was the IT course that I referenced earlier. Jim Rohn said, if someone is going down the wrong road, he doesn't need motivation to speed him up. He needs education to turn him around. In order for that education to positively affect their life, the incarcerated adult can turn their life around, but they first must be provided the opportunity to attain that education. Thank you.
So are these on? I think, can you hear me all right? Is that on? So we have a few minutes for questions and answers, and we've had a couple that have come in from the online, and we encourage anyone who's online, please go ahead and send those questions. Keep them coming. We may not be able to answer them right now, but we are definitely collecting them, and we will get to them, and we'll turn to the floor in a moment. Let me just begin with a couple questions we have here. One, just to follow up. You said that there was, I'm sorry, this is for Aaron. You said that there was kind of competition for some of the college programs that you had. For the GED, was it the same, and were there any constraints on people getting a GED?
The GED class, if you came in, well, anyone entering the facility took an assessment test. That's what we called it, the assessment test. Even if you could provide proof of a high school diploma, you still had to take the placement test. For those who could not pass the test and had no proof of a diploma, they then were told to sign up for a GED class. Once you were taken into the GED class, and like I said, there was a waiting list for them as well. Once you were accepted into the GED class, before you could actually take the test to get your GED, the institution would administer what they called the pre-GED, which in my experience with that, in my opinion, is a little bit tougher than the GED actually would be. And the reasoning behind that is for every GED, actual GED test as what is administered in the facility, the institution had to pay for that. It was not free. And I guess what they felt like was if they were going to pay for it, you better be passing it. So they would administer what was called the pre-GED first. You had to pass at the institutional level the pre-GED before they would allow you to sign up and actually take the GED.
Thank you. So we have a mix of questions. I'm going to thank you for all those coming in. Let me run through some of the easy ones first that had to do with the first presentation. Was the prison study done in English only was one of the questions. The background questionnaire was administered in both English and Spanish, but the actual assessment of skills was all in English. All the literacy numeracy questions were in English. The question came in also, were private prisons included? The frame that was used in order to randomly select the prisons included any state and federal prisoners, and there were some state and federal prisoners that were in private prisons that were contracted to hold state and federal prisoners. If a private prison was contracted in this way, it was included in the frame and could have been sampled, randomly sampled. So there were no private prisons that were not holding state or federal prisoners included. We had a question about the two modes of the survey, paper and pencil. That is the same as done in the household. People in the household study could also take it on paper and pencil, and the two modes have been studied to be comparable, have been shown to be comparable. The last question in regard to the presentation that I gave was, how closely are the PIAAC prison studies and earlier prison studies done? How closely are they comparable? They will be completely comparable once the previous studies have been rescaled. The PIAAC scale is now being applied, or rather the previous studies data are now going to be put onto the PIAAC prison study scale so that we will have trend data across all 3 studies. Turning, you have a whole selection here. Are you ready? So
Sure.
hopefully you can give relatively short answers and we can get through as many of these as we can in the time. But we'll do our best. One question came in. If you were sign up for a program and it didn't meet your expectations, could you discontinue it or change?
We could drop out of a class, but if you did that, then the institution would have considered as if you had graduated, and you would have to wait 3 to 4 years to sign up to take another one. So once you signed up to a class, it better be one that you're really interested in, or because you're stuck with it, or you're stuck with nothing.
What would you think of awards for completing prison education programs with an award of good time or some time off a sentence?
I think you definitely have even more people interested. I mean, I think that was something that those of us that were heavily involved in the educational programs while we were there had talked about, you know, oh, well, if they gave me good time for finishing this, I'd be home already kind of thing. It makes it hard because you want to make sure people are in these classes for the right reason. I say yes, it's a good idea as long as it's for successful completion, someone who has successfully made it through the class or program.
Do you think, excuse me, that prisoners would benefit from work-study programs where the tutors or mentors paid? Let me see if I understood that right. So if the tutors or mentors were also incarcerated and they were paid, would that benefit the prisoners?
We were paid. When I was a college tutor, that was my job. I got paid for it. Now, mind you, I will also say that the institution I was at, the highest pay of any institutional job was 45 cents an hour, which is what I got. That's what I got as a college tutor. And for most jobs, you had to start at a lower rate and work your way up. But the college tutor positions were 45 cents. And I definitely think that it was beneficial to have them. I was very busy as a college tutor. All of the college tutors were exceptionally busy, like stressed out, busy.
We have a couple more questions that have come in from online, but I want to make sure that we have equal time for the floor. Are there any questions from the floor at the moment? And if not, that's okay. We have a lot of questions that have been coming in online, but I'll give you a moment to put your hand up, or I'll come back in another moment. Okay. Question came in about the PIAAC assessment. Who designed the assessment? And that's a good question. PIAAC is an international instrument that has been developed by the OECD. That's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development based in Paris. The U.S. is a member and participates in the development of PIAAC. The first administration of PIAAC in 2011-2012 took several years to develop, and the U.S. was part of that development. It involved experts in assessment from around the world, as well as representatives from each of the countries that participated in PIAAC. The question had to do with whether both rural and urban prison facilities were included in the sample of the study. The answer is that yes, all prisons that, as I said, that housed state or federal prisoners were included in the frame. The frame is what was used for the selection. A random selection of 100 prisons was made to begin the sample. 98% of them accepted and participated. They included, the way it was stratified, a variety of different types of prisons, so that it made sure that it was representative of both large and small, rural and urban, as well as we made sure that it was stratified so that we could capture data on female-only prisons, because that is one of the differences between PIAAC and the earlier studies, which did not have sufficient sample size for female inmates in order to be able to break out the data. So that is one of the new things that PIAAC allows. Another question that came in for Aaron. Were there any, for prisoners who had a GED or came in with a high school but were not yet ready for college level work, were there any developmental classes available for them? Would they be needed?
The only type of classes that were available if you had come in with a high school degree or excuse me, a high school diploma were the vocational courses, and that's what kind of got me involved in them to begin with, because I did graduate from high school. Things like the optical lens technology, learning to become a computer-aided drafter, and then there were a lot of maintenance trades. You could take plumbing, you could take HVAC, electrical, which I ended up taking. So those types of things were at first really the only thing that was offered. I used to tell some of the girls when they were first arriving, watch the bulletin boards, because they would hang up notices about programs that were being offered. And it was through that I found out about the UVA Darden School of Business offering the entrepreneurship program. It was through that I found out about the college classes. But it was also through that I found out about the Braille opportunity that I had. You didn't have to have college, you just had to have a high school diploma. And I remember one of the questions they had asked was, had you ever learned another language before? Because they said, or could you read music? They kind of, and it was comparable. I understood that if you could read music or read another language, it was essentially learning another language. You know, it's just one of the series of dots instead of a word. It was a series of dots on the page. So those types of programs were available where I was held. At other institutions, I think it would be much less. I would have had a very different experience.
Here's a question that may be hard to assess, but given your experience in the prison that you were at, what were the racial disparities in accessing the education and training programs, and in particular the Virginia pilot program that you mentioned?
It's funny because a fellow former inmate and I were just speaking about this. I was really trying to think back and think of anyone of color who was in the very first group selected, and I can only think of 2 out of the 25. And I don't know if that had to do with their qualifications or the interest. I don't know. I don't know exactly who applied. I just know who made it because I sat in classes with them and earned my degree with them. But literally 5 minutes before this started, we were talking about that, and I could only think of 2 out of 25.
One other question here. Do you have any idea how restrictions on ex-offenders to enter an occupation that requires an occupational license may limit training possibilities in prison? Or alternatively, how frequently is training that ex-offenders receive while in prison not recognized by occupational license boards after they get out?
That's a really good question. I really loved optical. I really, really wanted to come home and get into that field. I enjoyed it. I was really seemed to be really good at it, and I was really amped up because I had my certificate to be an optician. And when I came home from Sam's Club to the local corner ophthalmologist who had his own office, my certificate's pretty obsolete. They want you to be licensed, and licensed by the ABO, American Board of Opticians. And the ABO, I could qualify to sit for the test, but because I'm an ex-felon, I would have to jump through hoops of fire in order for that to happen. So unfortunately, it's very beneficial. I know all the same stuff. It's just getting to, having the opportunity to show someone that I can do this has been really difficult.
And this follows up on the very same point.
Okay.
So, and this person says, thank you for sharing your story. And I repeat that for all of us. It's a great pleasure to have you here today and to actually bring some life to the data, which otherwise can sometimes be dry. But the question here has to do with the educational opportunities that you had in prison. Have they actually led to job opportunities outside?
What I will say is, there are times where I go, oh my God, all that, I didn't, it was for nothing. But I don't think that that's true. When I came home, and it was actually through a friend that I got the job that I have now, I started on working as basically a ride attendant. There's an old historical carousel in downtown Hampton, if anybody's in that area. It's right next to the NASA Air and Space Center. And I literally was a ride operator. People would come in, pay to ride, and I would be the person to push the button to make it go around. And it's seasonal, and it's only part-time. after 3 or 4 months of being there, I was asked to return this year, but this year I'm managing it. So I manage the staff, and we just took on another park in part of Hampton through the History Museum is who I work for. And they've asked me to manage that as well. It's still part-time, so I still get no health benefits or any, I'm not salaried, I'm an hourly worker. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, when I get a job, I'm doing probably 3 times as much as somebody else would because I have so much more to prove. Like I said, I'm aware of that label. I'm trying to get people to see past it, so I'm going to do whatever I can to have that happen. But I think some of that drive and the persistence that I learned in taking the classes in prison. It's not easy to take a class in prison. They do shakedowns. They have a master pass list. You cannot get out of the building you live in to go somewhere else unless somebody has prior approved it and your name is actually on the list. If there's a computer glitch and your name's off that list, they don't care. You're not leaving. Studying, getting together for, we had regular college professors coming in to teach on site, and we were under the same syllabi that their students out on the outside were under. So if there was a group project, we had to do a group project. You better figure out how to do it, even though your partner lives way across the compound and they're not going to let you just get together, because that just doesn't happen. So I think going through the hardships and having to deal with everything that institutional life carries with it. And I'm not saying they should change that. I understand that those rules are in place for a reason. It's a prison, for crying out loud. But having to put up with all of that in order to accomplish what I did, I think really helped me for when I came home in dealing with the same type of thing and working with other people. There's some hotheads in there, and but you got to work with them anyway. And especially with my tutoring job, that really tested my character a couple of times, but it's helped me when I come home. I mean, just having co-workers is one thing, but then managing all these different personalities as well has been pretty difficult, and I find myself reverting back to coping and management techniques that I used while I was in prison. So hasn't landed me a full-time job yet, but I'm hopeful.
Thank you very, very much.